Our nation is at war. Protesters are claiming to be defending their communities against fascist overreach by harassing law enforcement carrying out legitimate operations under an administration that won both the electoral and popular votes, campaigning on those very same law enforcement operations. Public figures are increasingly becoming the targets of assassinations or attempted assassinations. For years, an administration gave excuse after excuse why it could not enforce border security, even suing individual states, i.e. Texas, that tried to defend themselves where the federal government would not, until its successor completely shut down the border with the swipe of a pen on the very first day back in office. The worst fraud in American history to the tune of billions of taxpayer dollars going to sham businesses has been uncovered by young independent journalists, while legacy journalists are more interested in harassing them on the streets. And they've only just scratched the surface. More universal judicial injunctions, an action that had little to no precedent before the 1960s, have been placed against the current president than all other presidents in American history combined. Political polarization is worse today than at any time since the Civil War. Last week's video got me thinking a lot. I was going to try to get back to Christian voter issue discussion videos, but I just couldn't stop thinking about the current political and societal tension in the United States. So, I'm going to postpone the voting videos until later this year, closer to the actual midterms. Instead, I'd like to talk for a while about something I've begun to refer as the American Cold War. For decades, things have been put into motion that are just now coming to a head in what some are calling the fourth turning. According to the work of William Strauss and Neil Howe, these periods of regular 80 to 100 year cycles throughout American history are times of great chaos, upheaval, and transformation. It's worth taking a look at the previous iterations of this fourth turning. The first iteration, the United States was born through the fires of revolution, breaking away from the most powerful empire of its day. It emerged as a bold, new republic unlike anything the world had seen before. In its second iteration, nearly 80 years after the end of the American Revolution, our young country was nearly destroyed herself over the issues of slavery and states' autonomy in the American Civil War. We still have not surpassed the carnage of this war, and after years of brutal fighting, hundreds of thousands were dead, and our traumatized nation struggled to rebuild. The third iteration, and finally, 76 years after the Confederate surrender at the Appomattox Courthouse, it was the fourth turning's third visit in our national history that saw us drawn into World War II. And while the American continent was left largely untouched, except for Pearl Harbor and Alaska, the entire nation was committed to the war effort, and hundreds of thousands more young Americans lost their lives in battlefronts across the planet. Despite the loss of blood and treasure, we emerged more powerful than ever, as one of two global superpowers to lead the charge into the remaining 20th century. Now, nearly 81 years after the conclusion of the war in the Pacific, our appointment has come due once again. Will we see armed conflict break out and have our mettle tested in the forge and fires of war? Will we see upheaval and mass unrest on the home front that will ultimately transform this nation into yet something new once again? That remains to be seen. This is, after all, a theory. It's not proven science and nothing set in stone. Still, there's a lot to consider there. We find ourselves today in the midst of a debaucherous and decadent nation with an array of interest groups, all trying to pull in different directions. Most of these realize they cannot accomplish their goals on their own and have aligned with one of two sides, the progressive left or the conservative right. There are exceptions, and some may prefer not to get involved at all and wait until it all just blows over. But the fact remains the two primary camps are becoming increasingly polarized as they compete to gather supporters into their respective coalitions. Common ground is becoming more and more difficult to find because the left and the right have very different worldviews and want to take our country down two very different paths. On the progressive left, you have a general disdain for America, as it has been and is today. Decades of indoctrination under Marxist critical theory and inculcating the lessons of grievance studies has now borne fruit. And we have a significant portion of the U.S. population that hates American history, American tradition, American values, and have an intense desire to enact radical change to push it into a new form, generally socialist, though there are those who want another form for an America of the future. On the right, there is generally a reverence for American history, tradition, and values, as those more aligned with conservatism desire to preserve the better parts of our nation and culture while addressing problems when they arise. This is being tested by the current conditions, as more and more on the right are becoming open to more extreme actions to push back against what they perceive as a failure of conservatives to truly conserve anything over the last few decades. There are, of course, others still who swing from one camp to the next, largely dependent upon which direction they perceive the political and societal winds to be blowing. These tend to be your corporate types. Over the course of the next couple of months, I want to explore these different factions, their history, their characteristics, their goals, and most importantly, help you to distinguish friend from foe. I'm no expert. I'm no professional. There are certainly others who could put better and more thorough information in front of you. But even so, I want to do my best with what time and resources I have. This is something I'm passionate about. I will make no effort to hide my own bias. I'm a committed Christian, a staunch conservative, a supporter of the current administration, and someone who wants to see the United States win. And to see our nation and our people provided for first and foremost. I do not wish to convert others to the Christian faith by the sword or force of state, but my worldview and politics are inseparably connected to my faith, as is our country throughout her history. This is right and good. It is uniquely American. I can think of no worse outcome than to become like Canada or Europe, a truly apostate, reprobate society that does nothing to protect its own from the chaos of those who come to abuse its goodwill, violate her citizens, and quash any dissent to the globalist agenda. To me, victory means taking the actions necessary to implement our policies and enforce our vision of a strong, prosperous, moral, and free America. I would prefer to accomplish this through persuasion and the exchange of ideas, and following the ordinary pathways to write, pass, and then enforce laws. But this is becoming increasingly difficult to do, with a left that is less willing to speak and is much more willing to engage in or justify violence, up to and including our murders in broad daylight. These same leftists regularly tell us to our faces all the ways they're going to punish us when they return to power. I want to see their movements crushed and forever removed from society, either by a combination of force and or social coercion. I want the right to wield power when we give it to them. We must speak up. We must get out and vote every election. We must reclaim our institutions. We must win. Our lives and our children's futures depend on it. The age of secularism is over. Our ideologically neutral and multicultural experiment has failed miserably. We cannot go on in this state of tension forever. Now, you must pick a side. Or you can cower from this decision and tacitly comply with whatever the outcome will be. One side will eventually win, and the other will eventually fade away over time or collapse altogether in dramatic fashion. I want to help you make that decision. At the end of this series, I want you to be able to answer one question. What kind of American are you? Stay tuned, because next week we're starting with Islam. Thank you for watching.